Hi there. In this video, I'm going to go over probably one of the biggest safety concerns when we're talking about lifting, and that is protecting your back, primarily your low back, but certainly the entire vertebral column. So whenever people are looking to lift something up from the ground or partially elevated from the ground, the biggest risk for most people is that they're going to lift bending through that lower back, as you can kind of see me do right there, or bending through the upper back up here, or even a combination of the two, which is really, really poor for that back. It's not really safe. That C shape of the spine can lead to a lot of injuries and pain and problems. So your vertebral column is actually in a somewhat of an S shape, and we can see that when we stand. You guys can kind of see the curve here and then the indent here within my low back. So that column is the strongest and most resilient when it's in that sort of elongated S shape, and holding it in that position is ideal for keeping your back safe when you lift. So to avoid that C-shaped spine, one of the things you want to do is develop what we call the hip hinge, and that's basically where we are stabilizing the spine and hinging through the hip joint to lift. So that's easier said than done for most people. So if you're going to develop your hip hinge, the first thing you should do is break it down into the most simplest form. So the best way to do that is to do it from a crawling or quadruped position and just use the hips to develop movement while stabilizing that core. And when we do it this way, it's relatively low risk and gives you a chance to practice some repetitions and moving through the hips and not through that spine. So to do that, what you're going to do is just set yourself up, hips or legs and knees hip width apart, arms shoulder width apart, and from here all you're going to do is shift your hip back. So you're going to try and stabilize your core in its neutral elongated S position, and you're just going to bring your hips back, rocking those hips back. So that's a really, really basic, simple way to get the feel for a hip hinge. After that feels good and comfortable, you can actually bring that up into a tall kneeling position where I'm going to bring my hips down towards my heel. So I'm actually trying to shift it back. A great tool to use as an assist for this is a dowel or a broomstick. And what you want to do for that is you'll just place it through the center of your back. So it should be between the two glute muscles of your cheeks, it should be touching the upper back, and it also should be touching your head. So that puts us in a nice straight position, and the three key contact points are there. From here, we're just shifting back, and all 3 points should remain in contact throughout. Okay, so that's sort of that second level with a little piece of feedback. This can be expanded or progressed to be in a standing position, and for this same setup, all we're going to do is we're going to bend over, but instead of thinking of bending forward, I want you to think about shooting your hips backwards while keeping that doweling in place. Just like so. So practicing this, doing it in a warm-up, gets your brain thinking about what you need to do before you lift, and allows you to practice that safe hinge for lifting. To translate this or progress this even further, you could use a simple cue of placing an object behind you. So I have a wall here. I'm going to be about a foot in front of that wall. And one of the things I can do is locking in that core. I'm going to bend down, shooting my hips back until my hips actually touch that wall. And that's a nice drill to practice your hinge. Noticing that everything from the hips up stays in line, and that the hips are moving backwards versus simply my body going forward. I would fall forward if I went too far, so we need to have the hips shooting backwards to make that hinge happen. Once you're comfortable with that hinge and you're able to replicate it with good alignment within that spine, then you're ready to load it. So the first step to loading it would be what I would call a Romanian deadlift, or a partial range of motion, For the deadlift, I like to use dumbbells or kettlebells first. That way you have a little more freedom of movement. And what you're gonna do here is you're just gonna close your armpits as if you're holding onto a pencil or a piece of paper under your arm. And from here, you're gonna do everything we talked about before. You're gonna shoot your hips back, keeping that spine nice and aligned, coming back up while maintaining the armpit squeeze as well. Another cue for you for the Romanian deadlift is to kind of separate the floor with your feet as if there was a piece of paper or a paper towel between my two toes. I'm trying to tear it by pulling it apart. Just a small contraction there. That actually activates our glute muscles along with the armpit contraction. Creates a nice, stable, safe low back. Once you get better, and if your range allows for it, you can always increase further and further into that hinge or Romanian deadlift. What you don't want to do, however, is go down, get to your end range in terms of your mobility, and then go into this C shape. That's equally dangerous. So you want to practice that hinge, keeping your back safe, and work on flexibility outside of the actual exercise. I hope you found this video helpful, and good luck with your hip hinge.